Part 1. The Shop That Shouldn't Exist. The morning Mira Solano turned 11 was the morning she found the map that breathed. It started the way all extraordinary days begin, with something perfectly ordinary. Her father, a tall man named Edwin who smelled permanently of ink and pine resin, set a plate of blueberry pancakes on the kitchen table and told her to eat quickly because he had a surprise waiting at his shop. Edwin Solano was a cartographer, a person who made maps. Not digital maps that you swiped on a phone screen, but real maps, drawn by hand, printed on thick, cream-colored paper and framed in dark wooden frames. His shop was called The Last Meridian, and it sat wedged between a dry cleaner's and a Vietnamese restaurant on Comstock Lane in a town called Graywick, which was neither large enough to be exciting nor small enough to be charming. Mira loved her father's shop. She loved the smell of it, old paper and walnut ink, and something faintly electric like the air before a thunderstorm. She loved the rows of maps on the walls, maps of mountain ranges that no longer existed, maps of ocean floors that had never been fully explored, maps of cities from 500 years ago when people still believed dragons lived at the edges of the world. She did not love what awaited her that Tuesday morning. "A job," her father said proudly, gesturing around the shop. "Your very own job, starting today since school is out for the summer." Mira looked at the stacks of unsorted papers, the boxes of unfiled prints, the ancient filing cabinet with the broken second drawer, and the general state of cheerful disaster that described every corner of the Last Meridian. "You want me to organize all of this?" she said. "Think of it as an adventure." "Adventures," Mira said flatly, "have dragons." Her father's eyes crinkled. "Don't be so sure." He disappeared into the back room, where he spent most of his days hunched over his drawing table with magnifying spectacles perched on his nose, and Mira was left alone with the shop, a feather duster, and her deep, abiding suspicion that the summer was already ruined. She started with the filing cabinet, because the filing cabinet was the least terrifying thing in the room. The top drawer opened smoothly and contained alphabetized folders of receipts. The third drawer contained a collection of rolled-up maps in cardboard tubes, each labeled in her father's cramped handwriting. The bottom drawer contained what appeared to be a family of dust bunnies and one very old rubber band that snapped immediately when she touched it. The second drawer, the broken one, was stuck shut, as usual. Mira gave it a half-hearted tug. Nothing. She tugged harder. The drawer didn't budge. She braced her foot against the cabinet and pulled with both hands, and the drawer flew open so suddenly that she stumbled backward and sat down hard on the floor. She sat there for a moment, catching her breath, and then looked up at the open drawer. Inside was a single map. Not a rolled-up map in a cardboard tube, not a folded map in a plastic sleeve, just a flat, loose piece of paper, roughly the size of a pillowcase, covered in the most intricate drawing Mira had ever seen. She got up slowly and lifted it out. The paper was thick and strange, not quite like paper at all. It had a faint warmth to it, like something left near a radiator. The surface was covered in a web of lines and symbols and tiny illustrations so detailed that Mira had to lean in close to see them properly. There were mountains no bigger than her thumbnail, each one individually shaded. There were forests of minuscule trees. There were rivers that wound in perfect, delicate curves across the page. There were towns, dozens of them, with hand-drawn buildings so small she needed to squint. At the center of the map was a large blank space, roughly circular, where no roads or rivers ran and no towns appeared. Around its edges, someone had written in letters too small to read without squinting, "Here the known world ends." Mira held the map up to the window, where the morning light came in slanted and gold. That was when she saw it move. Not dramatically, not the way things moved in movies, with a shudder and a flash. It was subtle. A river on the left side of the map shifted, its curve changing by perhaps a millimeter. A tiny forest on the right side swayed, as if touched by a breeze that existed only inside the paper. In the blank space at the center, something that might have been fog drifted slowly from one side to the other. Mira set the map down very carefully on top of the filing cabinet. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked it back up because she was 11 years old and curious people don't put interesting things down. "Dad?" she called. No answer from the back room. Her father was probably already lost in his work, headphones on, ink-stained fingers moving over a new commission. Mira looked at the map again. In the lower right corner, so faint she almost missed it, was a maker's mark. A tiny compass rose with a name written beneath it in script so small she had to hold the map inches from her face to read it. Made by the hands of A. Solano, for the one who must finish it. A. Solano. Mira's grandmother had been named Aurelia Solano. She had died before Mira was born, but her portrait hung in the front hallway of their house. A sharp-eyed woman with silver-streaked hair and ink-stained fingers, just like her father. Mira's grandmother, who had also been a cartographer. "Huh," said Mira. The fog in the blank center of the map drifted a little further to the left. Her father, when she showed him the map, went very still in a way that made Mira's stomach feel strange. He stood at his drawing table with the map spread flat in front of him, and he looked at it for a long time without saying anything. "Where did you find this?" he said finally. "The broken drawer, the second one." He touched the edge of the paper with one careful fingertip. "It moves," Mira said. "I've been watching it. The rivers shift. That tiny forest in the corner, look, it's been slowly moving east for the last 20 minutes. He didn't say it didn't move. He didn't give her the look adults give children when they say things that don't make logical sense. He just kept looking at the map with that same strange stillness, and then he said, very quietly, "My mother made this." "I know, I read the mark." "She made it the year before she disappeared." He looked up. "Mira, I need you to put this back where you found it and leave it alone." Mira stared at him. "You never told me your mother disappeared." "It's not something I talk about." "She disappeared? Like died?" "Like disappeared." He began to carefully roll up the map. They never found." He stopped, started again. "She went somewhere she shouldn't have gone and she didn't come back, and that was 30 years ago, and I would very much like to not revisit this." He slid the rolled map into a cardboard tube and held it to Mira. "What does 'for the one who must finish it' mean?" Her father's jaw tightened. "I don't know." But the way he said it, quickly, flatly, not meeting his eyes, told Mira he was lying, and Mira was very good at knowing when her father was lying, because her father was very bad at it. She put the map back in the second drawer. She did not stop thinking about it for the rest of the day.
Part 2. The map gets bigger. 3 things happened over the next week that changed everything. The first was that new details appeared on the map. Mira checked it every morning before her father arrived at the shop, and every morning there was something new. A new road, thin as a hair, appeared running north from a town called Veth. A lighthouse appeared on a coastline that hadn't had one before. In the blank center space, the fog had thinned enough to reveal what looked like the tip of a very large tower. The map was growing itself, filling itself in, like a story being written in real time. The second thing that happened was that Mira's grandmother's journal. It was tucked under a loose floorboard in the shop's back room, a fact she only discovered because she tripped over the raised edge of the board while carrying a box of paper, dropped the box, and in picking up the scattered sheets, found that the board could be lifted. Beneath it was a small tin box, and inside the tin box was a water-stained leather journal with the initials A.S. stamped on the cover. Mira did not tell her father about the journal. She brought it home and read it in one long sitting, while her father made dinner downstairs, and by the time she heard him calling her down to eat, she knew 3 very important things. 1. There was a place called the unmapped world, which existed in the space between the edges of all the maps ever made. A kind of hidden territory that cartographers had whispered about for centuries. A place you could only reach if you had the right map and knew how to use it. 2. Aurelia Solano had spent most of her life trying to find a way in. She believed the unmapped world was a real place with real geography and that someone needed to chart it, to draw its roads and rivers and towns into being, because a place that no one has mapped is a place that is slowly, invisibly disappearing. 3. She had found the way in. The journal's last entry, dated 30 years ago, read, "The map is nearly ready. The door opens at the center. I understand now what it means to finish it. You cannot finish it from here. You have to go inside. Edwin will worry. Edwin worries about everything, like his father did. I'll leave the map for whoever comes after me, whoever has the cartographer's gift, the one who can read a map not just with their eyes, but with their whole self. They'll know what to do. I love this ridiculous, impossible, beautiful world. Both of them." The third thing that happened was that Mira's father vanished. She came down to breakfast on a Thursday morning, and his coffee cup was still on the counter, half full and cold. His shoes were by the door. His phone was on the kitchen table. The door to the back room in the shop, which connected to the house through a short hallway, was standing open. On his drawing table was the cardboard tube, and the tube was empty. The map was gone, and so was Edwin Solano.
Part 3. Into the Center. Mira was 11, not helpless. She did not panic. She sat down at her father's drawing table and thought very carefully, the way her father had taught her to think. Systematically, Mira. Start from what you know and work outward. What she knew, her grandmother had gone into the unmapped world 30 years ago and hadn't come back. Her father had, apparently, done something similar this morning. The map was involved. The journal said the door was at the center, and the center of the map was the blank space with the tower in it. What she also knew, she was a cartographer's daughter, and she had been reading maps her whole life. She had grown up running her fingers over printed contour lines and knowing instinctively which way a river would flow, which mountain pass was crossable, which roads connected and which ones dead-ended. Her father called it the gift. She had always thought he was just being sentimental. Maybe he wasn't. She went to the filing cabinet, opened the broken second drawer. The map was back. Not the same as before. It was different now, larger. The blank center space was much smaller, with the tower now clearly visible, surrounded by roads and hills and a river that curved around it like a moat. And at the very center of what remained of the blank space, so small she needed a magnifying glass to read it, were 7 words. Press your thumb here to open the door. Mira looked at this for a long moment. Then she pressed her thumb to the center of the map. The paper rippled like water. The warmth she'd felt before became a heat, not burning but insistent, like a hand placed urgently on her arm. The lines of the map began to glow faintly, the gold of the ink brightening to something that wasn't quite light but wasn't quite not. The air in the shop smelled suddenly of pine forests and open water and cold stone. And the map opened. There is no better word for it.
It opened the way a door opens, but without a hinge. It simply separated from one state of being into another. The paper folded back around her thumb, and then around her hand, and then the map was no longer something she was holding, but something she was inside, and the shop was gone, and she was standing on a hillside in the early morning light of a world that had not yet been finished.
The first thing she noticed was the color. Everything was slightly too vivid. The green of the grass was a shade more green than green. The blue of the sky had a depth to it like stained glass, and the light had a golden quality that made every surface look like it was lit from the inside. It was beautiful the way a painting is beautiful, slightly unreal, slightly more perfect than the ordinary world. The second thing she noticed was the map. It was still in her hand, but it was different now, translucent, almost see-through, and when she held it up and looked through it at the landscape around her, the drawn features aligned perfectly with the real ones. The river on the map was the river in the valley below. The road on the map was the road she was standing beside. The tower was ahead of her, beyond 2 hills, its tip just visible. The third thing she noticed was the boy. He was sitting on a large rock at the side of the road, eating what appeared to be a bright blue apple and watching her with an expression of calm interest that suggested that people appearing out of nowhere was not unusual to him. He was about her age, maybe a year older, with dark brown skin and close-cropped hair and very bright, watchful eyes. He was wearing clothes that looked like they belonged to no particular era, rough-spun trousers, a loose shirt, worn boots that were clearly designed for a lot of walking. "Cartographer?" he said. "Yes," said Mira, then caught herself. "My father is, and my grandmother was. I'm Mira." The boy hopped off the rock. "I'm Cass, short for Cassius, but nobody calls me that." He looked at the map in her hand. "That's a Solano map." "My grandmother made it." "Aurelia." He said the name easily, like someone he knew. "She drew the northern quarter of this world. Some of the rivers up there are named after her. She had final say on the geography, see, because she was the one who charted it, and the cartographer names things. It's part of how it works." Mira looked at him. "You talk like you've lived here a long time." 2 years. He shrugged, but there was something behind the shrug, something practiced, something learned. "I came with my uncle. He was a cartographer too. He got stuck. That's why I'm here, trying to find him." Something tightened in Mira's chest. "My father just went missing too, this morning." The two of them looked at each other. "The tower," Cass said. "That's where everyone goes when they get stuck, or so the stories say." "What stories?" He held out the blue apple. "Want some? It tastes like apples, but also somehow like the ocean." "I want to find my father." "Right." He put the apple in his pocket. "The tower it is." They walked for most of the morning, and Cass explained the world as they went. The unmapped world was real as anything, but it was also unfinished. Aurelia's journal was right about that. The world had been slowly filling itself in over the centuries as cartographers made their maps and, in doing so, created the geography they described, because, as Cass explained it, a thing that is mapped becomes permanent, and a thing that is permanent becomes real. "So, maps make the world?" Mira asked. "They make this world. The one back home, your world, the ordinary one, that one made itself. This one needs help." He waved at the hills around them. "See how clear the path is here? This section was mapped 10 years ago by a cartographer from Norway. Every tree, every stone, everything exactly where the map shows it. Up ahead," he gestured toward a section of landscape that seemed somehow blurrier, less defined, colors softer, shapes less distinct. "That part hasn't been mapped yet. It's dangerous up there." "Dangerous how?" Mira asked. "Things that haven't been mapped don't know what they are yet. They keep changing.
You step on solid ground and it shifts into marsh. The roads loop back on themselves. Animals that haven't been drawn yet look like something different every time you see them. And if you spend too long in an unmapped area, you start to change too. Mira held up her map. Is the tower in a mapped area? Cass was quiet for a moment. Mostly. Mostly isn't yes. No, he agreed, but it's the best answer I've got. They reached the crest of the second hill just as the sun hit noon overhead, and they both stopped at the site below them. The tower stood at the center of a wide valley by the looping river, just as the map showed, but the map had not captured how big it was. It rose so high that its upper levels vanished into a low cloud, and it was made of stone so dark it was almost black, and it was surrounded not by a moat, but by a ring of forest that was unmistakably shifting. As Mira watched, a section of the forest on the eastern side moved 30 feet to the left. Not individual trees moving, the entire section, soil and roots and all, sliding sideways like a chess piece. Then another section on the north rotated slowly 90 degrees. That's the unmapped part, Cass said. The forest moves. The forest hasn't been told what forests do yet, so it experiments. Mira studied the map through narrowed eyes. There was a path drawn on it that went straight through the forest to the tower's entrance, or what looked like the entrance, a dark arch at the base of the south face. But given that the forest was currently not staying in one place, the path seemed optimistic. You've been here 2 years. Have you gotten into the tower before? Cass's expression shifted, complicated, something that wanted to be confident but wasn't quite. I got to the edge of the forest once. The trees moved and I lost the path. It took me 3 days to get back out. I was a lot less careful then. What's different now? He looked at her map. You have a Solano original. The living maps, they don't just show the world, they interact with it. You can use it to hold things in place. Mira looked at the map, then at the shifting forest, then at the map again. Hold things in place how? Draw on it, add to it. If you draw something on the map, it becomes permanent. If you draw the path stays. But I don't have... She checked her jacket pockets, suddenly hopeful, and found in the left front pocket a stub of pencil so short it was nearly useless. She held it up. Cass grinned for the first time, and it changed his whole face. A cartographer's daughter, and you had a pencil this whole time. Perfect. Let's go.
Part 5. The Forest That Couldn't Make Up Its Mind. Standing at the edge of the moving forest was one of the stranger experiences of Mira's life, and she was having a very strange day. Close up, it was less frightening than it had looked from the hill, and also more frightening, which was somehow worse. Individual trees were perfectly ordinary looking. Oak and birch and pine, ordinary bark, ordinary roots. But every few minutes the arrangement shifted. A gap that had been on her left moved to her right. A dense thicket that had been ahead of her became a clearing. The floor beneath the trees was a patchwork of different things, moss here, dry leaves there, bare rock in one spot, soft mud in another, and they swapped with each other without warning. The map says the path goes straight south-southeast, said Mira. South-southeast of what? The forest is about 40 feet from where it was when I last tried this. Mira looked at the map, then at the forest, then held the map up and peered through its translucent surface at the landscape beyond. She adjusted the angle, looking for the alignment between the drawn path and where she was standing. I need to draw the starting point, she said, a fixed point that doesn't move. If I draw it on the map, it locks in place, right? So if I draw the entrance to the path right here, she pressed the pencil stub to the paper and made a small X, then it has to stay here. She lowered the map. The edge of the forest had stilled. Not the whole forest. She could see sections further in still shifting around, but the area directly in front of her, about 30 feet wide, had gone solid and stationary. The trees stood still. The ground beneath them was consistent, packed earth and dry leaves. "That worked," said Cass, with more surprise than Mira found entirely comforting. "Don't sound so shocked." She studied the map. The path went in a long, not quite straight line through the forest to the tower entrance. She estimated the distance at roughly half a mile. "If I draw as we walk, mark the path as we go, it should stay fixed behind and in front of us. The pencil will run out." Mira looked at the stub. It was barely an inch long. "I'll draw small." They walked. It was the most concentrated Mira had ever been in her life. She walked and drew simultaneously, glancing up at the forest and back down at the map with every step, trying to capture the path accurately. The slight left bend around a large oak, the dip where the ground went soft, the spot where two paths diverged and the right-hand one led toward the tower. As she drew, the forest ahead of them solidified, settling into a defined shape around the drawn path, like concrete poured around a frame. But the sections beyond the path were still moving. Twice, a displaced tree section lurched too close, and Mira had to draw a quick border to push it back, adding detail to the edges of the path to shore them up. Her hand was cramping. The pencil was getting dangerously short. "Almost there," said Cass. "I can see the arch." She could see it too, a dark stone archway in the base of the tower, about 100 feet ahead, open and waiting. And then the pencil broke. Not ran out, broke, the wood splitting, the graphite snapping in two, and Mira was left with half a stub that was now essentially useless, too short to grip properly, and there was still 50 feet of unmapped forest between her and the tower entrance. The forest, noticing the sudden absence of the mapping force, began immediately to take advantage. A section to her left slid forward. A grove of birches to her right rotated clockwise. The path ahead of her, the part she hadn't yet drawn, began to blur. "Run," said Cass. They ran. The forest churned round them, but it moved slowly. Large sections didn't relocate instantly. They shifted, they slid, and Mira and Cass were fast enough to stay ahead of it. She ran with the map clutched in both hands, feeling the paper vibrate against her palms as the world tried to rearrange itself, and she focused her whole mind on the archway ahead of her, on the stone floor just beyond it, on the idea that stone floors were solid and unambiguous and not given to experimental rearrangement. They crossed under the arch at a dead sprint and collapsed against the wall on the other side, breathing hard. Behind them, the forest shifted back, sealing the entrance off, but they were through. Mira looked at the broken pencil stub in her palm. Then she looked at Cass. "Good run," he said. "Good run," she agreed.
Part 6. The Tower. The inside of the tower was not what Mira had expected. She had expected dark stone corridors, maybe torches, maybe the kind of dramatic, gloomy atmosphere that the outside of the tower had been strongly suggesting. What she found instead was a tall, circular room with walls covered entirely in maps. Not hung maps, grown maps. They grew from the stone itself, the way lichen or moss grows on the surface of a rock, except these were fine, intricate lines of something luminous, something that wasn't quite ink and wasn't quite light, and they were moving constantly, new lines appearing and old ones shifting, the entire surface of every wall a living document in perpetual revision. "Oh," breathed Mira. "Yeah," said Cass quietly. "I've heard about this. This is the index." "The what?" "The index of the unmapped world. Every map ever made of this place, every section ever charted. It's all here, combined, updated constantly. This is where the world keeps track of itself." A spiral staircase of dark stone rose through the center of the room, disappearing upward into the tower's heights. Around the base of the room, arranged in a careful circle, were 12 stone pedestals, and on each one sat a rolled map in a glass case.
Mira walked slowly around the room, looking at the map-covered walls, feeling the strange sensation of being inside the thing she had spent her life looking at from outside. She found, after 2 full circles of the room, a section of wall where the lines were thinner, more tentative, recent, and in the middle of this section she could see her grandmother's compass rose maker's mark, unmistakable. "Aurelius section," she said softly. "The northern quarter," Cass confirmed. He came to stand beside her. She mapped most of it. "See how detailed it is? Every road, every village, that's all her." Mira traced the lines with her finger, not touching the wall, just following them through the air, a breath's width away. Her grandmother's handwriting, 30 years old, still warm, still moving. "We need to go up," she said. She wasn't sure how she knew. It was a feeling more than a thought, the same instinct that made her know which way a river flowed from its contour lines, which mountain was highest from the shape of its shadows. The tower pulled at her upward, and she trusted it. The staircase was long. They walked for what felt like 15 minutes before the stairs leveled off at a landing with a low door, and through the door was a second room, smaller, plainer, no maps on the walls, just a wide window that looked out over the entire valley, the entire visible sweep of the world, and 2 chairs. In the chairs sat Edwin Solano and a man Mira didn't recognize. "Dad," Mira said. Her father looked up. His expression went through approximately 7 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, relief, fear, love, confusion, exasperation, and something deep and complicated that Mira didn't have a name for yet. "Dad," Mira said. He stood up. "How, you came through the—" He looked at the map in her hands and then looked at her with an expression she recognized, the way he looked at a map that was exactly right, that had been drawn perfectly, that showed the world clearly and truthfully. He looked at her like she was something he was proud of. "You mapped your way through the forest. I had a pencil." The man in the other chair had stood up too. He was older, maybe 35, with the same watchful eyes as Cass. He looked at Cass with an expression that was all the emotions Mira's father had just had, but compressed into a few rapid blinks. "Uncle Reeve," Cass said, and his voice cracked a little, and Mira politely looked at the window to give him a moment. The view from the window was extraordinary. The whole valley spread below, with the river curving bright and blue in the afternoon light. And beyond the valley, the hills went on, and some sections of them were clear and vivid and detailed, and some sections were blurred and dim, the unmapped parts still becoming themselves. The world was so large, so much of it was still unfinished. "Why couldn't you leave?" Mira asked her father. "The tower," Edwin came to stand beside her. "You can come in, but the door locks from the outside if you don't have the right map. I thought I could come find her, your grandmother, and then come back, but I left the map behind by accident and—" "You locked yourself in." He looked ashamed in the way only parents can look ashamed, which is deeply and comprehensively. "I locked myself in." "Reeve came looking for Aurelia, too," Cass said. His uncle stood beside him, a hand on his shoulder. "Same thing. It's been 2 years, but the door is open now," Mira said. "I have the map." They all looked at her. "But I need to finish it first. That's what your grandmother said, right? That the map needed to be finished." Her father was quiet for a moment. "She said the world needs to be finished, mapped completely. That's the only way to make it permanent, to make it safe. How much is left?" He turned to the window and pointed at the blurred, uncertain regions beyond the clear hills. "Quite a lot." Mira looked at the map in her hands. It was fuller now than when she'd found it that morning. All the drawings she'd done in the forest had added to it. She could feel the pencil's work in the texture of the paper, slightly different where she'd drawn, as if the map itself knew which parts were new. "I have a broken pencil." Her father reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his pen, the one he always carried, a dark green fountain pen with a nib he sharpened himself, always filled with the walnut ink that made his maps uniquely his. He held it out to her. "You'll need this more than I will."
Part 7. The Art of Making a World. What followed was the most extraordinary 3 days of Mira's life. She did not map the entire unmapped world in 3 days. That would have taken years, perhaps a lifetime, perhaps several lifetimes. What she did was chart enough of it that the critical structures became permanent. The roads that connected the mapped regions, the river systems that gave the land its shape, the mountain ranges that served as the world's backbone. She worked from the top of the tower, where she could see the farthest, and from the ground, walking sections with Cass, while their fathers remained in the tower to stay safe. She worked with the fountain pen and her grandmother's map, adding detail by detail, her lines steady and careful, trying to match her grandmother's style and precision. It was hard. Her hand cramped constantly. She made mistakes, roads drawn at the wrong angle, a forest placed too far west, and had to find ways to correct them without disrupting what was already there. Each correction involved looking very carefully at the map and then at the landscape and finding the line of best truth between them, the place where the two versions of reality agreed. Cass was an unexpectedly good helper. He had spent 2 years walking the unmapped areas, and he knew the shape of the land the way you know the inside of a house you've lived in for a long time. He could tell her where the blurred regions had stable cores, places that had almost become solid on their own, that only needed a few lines to finish, and where the chaos ran deep and required more careful work. "This valley," he said on the second day, crouching beside a stream that kept changing direction, "it wants to be a valley. It's been trying. See how the hills on both sides are mostly consistent? The stream is the problem. Draw it once, definitively, and the whole valley will settle." Mira looked at the stream, tracing its current behavior with her eyes. It wasn't flowing randomly, it was choosing between two paths, switching back and forth, undecided. She looked at the map. There was space for a stream here, curving east to join the larger river. She drew the stream curving east. The real stream below her steadied. It chose east, its banks firmed up, the mud becoming defined and permanent. The grass beside it greened up, suddenly certain of its own position. The hills on both sides seemed to inhale and settle, and Mira felt, as she had felt every time she drew something permanent, a small internal shiver, not quite a sound and not quite a feeling, as the world registered the new fact of itself. "That's what it sounds like," Cass said, watching her face. "What does it sound like?" "Relief, like things exhaling after holding their breath for a very long time." On the evening of the second day, sitting on a hillside above a newly mapped village, a small collection of stone buildings with orange-tiled roofs that had settled into permanence an hour ago and now seemed to have always been there, Mira asked Cass about his 2 years in the world. He told her, slowly and carefully, in the way people tell stories they've been saving up, about arriving through a map his uncle had made, thinking it would be a quick trip, about his uncle getting locked in the tower, about the months of trying to free him, learning the geography of the world, getting to know its unmapped corners and its solidified centers. He'd made friends in the mapped villages. There were people here, proper inhabitants, who'd been here so long they'd become as fixed and permanent as the geography. "Are they from our world?" Mira asked. "Some of them, originally, a long time ago." He picked at the grass beside him. "Aurelia used to visit them. She's a hero here, you know. In the North Quarter, the towns she mapped first, that became permanent first, she's like a founding figure. They have a festival in the spring." Mira was quiet for a moment. "She's gone, though, isn't she? My grandmother?"
Cass nodded carefully. Nobody knows where she went. She mapped the north quarter, and then she kept going, further north, into the regions that hadn't been started yet. That was the last anyone heard. He glanced at her. But she's not in the tower. Your dad checked the whole place. She went into the unmapped parts and kept going? Yeah. Mira looked north, at the hills rolling away toward a smudge on the horizon where the world got uncertain, far away and large, still unfinished. Maybe she's still there, Mira said. Maybe, Cass said. They sat quietly for a while, watching the stars appear over the newly solidified village, which was making cheerful lights in its windows and sending up smoke from its chimneys, and feeling, in all the ways a world can feel, very much alive.
On the third day, they went north. Not all the way north, not into the deep unmapped regions where her grandmother had gone, but far enough to encounter the creatures that lived in the unfinished places, and to learn what the unmapped world kept secret in its uncertain corners. They were large and small simultaneously, which was confusing to look at directly. At first glance, they seemed huge, the size of a house or larger. At second glance, they seemed small enough to fit in a cupped palm. They had no fixed shape, which Mira had expected, but they had fixed personalities, which she hadn't. The first one they met was sitting in a clearing in an unmapped forest, and it appeared from moment to moment as a large tortoise, a cluster of silver balloons, a low pile of autumn leaves, and a section of very old stone wall. But its personality was consistent throughout, deeply, profoundly curious. It studied them with eyes that kept appearing and disappearing in different locations, and watched every move they made with total focused interest. Unmapped creatures, Cass said quietly. They've never been named or drawn. They're still figuring out what they are. Does drawing them fix them? Mira asked. It gives them a shape, but you have to get it right. You can't just draw any old thing. You have to look at them until you see what they actually are, underneath all the changing, the true shape. Mira looked at the creature very carefully. It shifted through its forms, tortoise, balloons, leaves, wall, and she watched the pattern of the shifting, the rhythm of it, the way certain shapes lingered longer than others. The tortoise appeared most often, and when it was a tortoise, there was something in its posture, head raised, eyes alert, curious but unafraid, that felt most essentially itself. It's watching, she said quietly. It's been watching this clearing for a very long time, watching things change and staying to see what happens. She drew it, a tortoise, but with something in the angle of its neck and the brightness of its eyes that tried to capture watching, waiting, curiosity. Around it she wrote in her smallest careful letters, "The watcher of the unfinished forest, old and patient and permanent." The creature went through 3 or 4 rapid shifts as if startled, and then, with what Mira felt was enormous dignity, settled. Into the tortoise, but a specific, distinct, particular tortoise now. It blinked once. It looked at her. It inclined its head, not a bow exactly, but the gesture of one being acknowledging another. Then it walked slowly off into the trees, which settled around it, becoming more defined themselves, as if the creature's permanent presence was enough to anchor nearby geography. "Well done," Cass said. He sounded impressed. "How many of those are there in the unmapped regions?" "No one knows. Hundreds, probably. Maybe more."
Mira was quiet for a moment, thinking about hundreds of creatures going through the same slow process of becoming, trying shape after shape, personality consistent, but form uncertain, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see what they truly were. "Someone needs to map all of them," she said. "That's the work. That's the work that never gets finished." That afternoon, they found the door. It was something Mira had not expected to find, not something she had known existed. It appeared when they crested a long hill at the northern edge of the mapped regions, a pale arch of stone in the middle of an open field, with nothing on either side, and the sense, if you positioned yourself just right and looked through it, of elsewhere on the other side. Not the blurred blue elsewhere of the unmapped regions, but a vivid, specific elsewhere, with golden light and distant mountains and the feeling of a very different world. "What is that?" Mira breathed. "Northern door," Cass said. He had gone quiet in a way that told Mira that he knew about this, had been here before, and it meant something to him. "There's 4 of them. They go to different places." "To our world?" "To different worlds." He paused. "There's one that goes to our world, south, back near where we came in. One that goes north, further in. One east and one west." He looked at the northern door. "This one goes further north, into older, unmapped territory, deeper in." Mira walked toward the arch. "Mira," Cass said. "I'm not going through," she said. But she walked up to it and stood at its threshold and looked through. On the other side was a landscape that was simultaneously more vivid and more tentative than anything she'd seen. Every color at maximum intensity, every line either perfectly sharp or completely blurred, no middle ground. A world in the process of deciding whether to be solid. And far away, at the limit of what she could see through the arch, something that might have been a figure, small with distance, moving slowly through tall grass, with the gait of someone who had been walking for a very long time and had no intention of stopping. A person with silver-streaked hair, moving north into the deep, unmapped places. The figure paused, looked back, almost as if it could feel the observation. Then it looked up, and even across that impossible distance, Mira felt the quality of that look, sharp-eyed, curious, alive. The figure raised one hand, a wave, or maybe something that meant, "I see you, I'm all right, keep going." Then it turned and walked on, north, into the unfinished brightness. Mira stood at the arch for a long moment. "She's still mapping," she said finally. "She went all the way in." "Yeah," Cass said softly. "She chose to stay." He didn't answer. The answer was in the quality of the silence. Mira stepped back from the arch. She looked at the map in her hands, her grandmother's map, the one that breathed, now nearly 3/4 filled with new detail, the blank center space reduced to a sliver. She felt something settle in her chest, not the sad kind of settling, the kind that comes from understanding something fully for the first time, from a picture coming into focus. Her grandmother hadn't disappeared. She hadn't been lost. She had gone north and kept going, and is still going, still doing the work that never gets finished, still mapping the unmapped, still giving form to the formless, still learning the true shape of things by looking at them carefully and long. Mira looked north through the arch one more time. "I'll come back," she said quietly, "when I'm ready." She wasn't sure whether it was a promise to her grandmother, or to the world itself, or to herself. It felt like all 3.
Part 9. Unlocking the Tower. They made it back by evening. The forest around the tower was still again. The sections Mira had drawn in her first crossing were fixed permanently now. the path through it clear and safe. They walked through without running, and Cass pointed out the trees she'd drawn the border around to push the forest back, now standing slightly apart from its neighbors with an air of mild self-importance. "It knows it's been formally placed," he said. "Trees don't know things. Trees in this world might." Upstairs in the tower, their fathers were exactly where they'd left them, Reeve and Edwin, sitting at the wide window, talking with the ease of two people who had spent 2 days in each other's company and found the fit comfortable. They looked up when the door opened and their respective children walked in, and both faces did the same rapid sweep of relief. "You look different," Edwin said to Mira. "I've been drawing a world," she said. "Also, I met a tortoise." "She mapped it," Cass clarified. "It's officially a watcher now." "I have so many questions," Edwin said. "Later," Mira said. "First, I need to unlock the door so we can go home." She looked at the map. The map, in response, seemed to look back. The last sliver of the blank center space was still there, the final unmapped section. She had been saving it. She understood now why she'd been saving it, even though she hadn't known she was doing it until this moment. The door could only be unlocked by completing the map. Not completing it in the sense of finishing the entire unmapped world. That work was for a lifetime, or several lifetimes, or maybe more. But completing the central document, the core map that her grandmother had started, the map that breathed. She sat down at the wide stone windowsill and spread the map over her knees. She looked at the final blank section. It was roughly the size of her palm, sitting at the center of the map where the door was. The tower was drawn there, and the forest, and the valley, and the river, everything they'd walked through, everything she'd added these 3 days. But the center itself, the heart of the map, the point from which the map had first opened, was still blank. What did you put at the center? Mira thought about it. What was the center of a world? Not a town, not a tower, not a road or river. The center was the organizing principle, the thing around which everything else arranged itself, the reason the map existed at all. She thought about her grandmother, walking north, still mapping after 30 years. She thought about Cass, spending 2 years searching for the uncle he loved. She thought about her father, who had spent his whole career making maps because his mother made maps, carrying on a tradition without fully understanding where it came from. She thought about the tortoise in the clearing, patiently watching, waiting to be seen. She thought about what Cass had said. You have to look at them until you see what they actually are, underneath all the changing. She picked up her father's pen and drew, in the center of the map, a compass rose. Not just any compass rose, Aurelia's compass rose, the one from the maker's mark, the one with the characteristic small flourish on the east point and the doubled lines on the north, but larger and more detailed, and her own too, different in small ways, the south point a little longer, the west point a little more curved, because it was both of theirs now, an inheritance made new. Around it she wrote, in letters as small and careful as her grandmother's, "Here the known world begins." The map sealed. The blank space was gone. The paper lost its warmth and became ordinary paper, still extraordinary in its detail, still the most intricate map Mira had ever seen, but no longer living in the shivering, breathing way it had been. It had become something different, not a living document, but a finished one, complete in itself, the way a story is complete when it finds an ending. A sound came from below, a deep, resonant click, as if a very large, very old lock had finally opened. "That's the door," Cass said. They went downstairs.
Part 10. Home. The door was in the wall below the index room, a heavy iron door that Mira was certain hadn't been there on her way up. It stood open now, and through it was the familiar smell of the shop on Comstock Lane, ink and pine resin and old paper, and the faint electrical smell she had always thought of as storms. Edwin Solano put his hand on Mira's shoulder as she looked at the open door. "Ready?" he said. "I want to come back," she said, "to finish the northern regions and the unmapped creatures. There are hundreds of them maybe, and they all need—" "I know," he said. "I know." He squeezed her shoulder. "We'll come back. We'll do it properly, with supplies and better pencils. Much better pencils. The best pencils, a whole case of them." Cass was standing with his uncle at the edge of the room, and they were having a quiet conversation that Mira wasn't listening to, but whose shape she could read from their postures, the careful back and forth of two people figuring out what came next. Reeve looked at the door, and then at the map-covered walls of the index room, and then at Cass, and Cass said something quiet, and Reeve nodded slowly. Mira went over. "Are you coming?" she asked. Cass looked at his uncle. Reeve looked at Cass. Something passed between them. "My uncle wants to stay, for now. There are sections in the east that haven't been mapped since he started, and—" "I understand," Mira said. She looked at Reeve. "I'm going to come back. I made a promise." Reeve looked at her for a moment with his watchful eyes, so like Cass's. "I know who you are," he said. "You look like Aurelia a little, around the eyes." Mira didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. She turned to Cass. He had his hands in his pockets and was looking at the floor with the expression of someone who has made a decision they're mostly at peace with, but not entirely. "You could come with us," she said. "I know," he looked up, "but 2 years. I know this world pretty well now. I know where the blurred parts are and where the stable ones are, and I know the creatures and the people, and—" he gestured vaguely. "It feels like unfinished work." "It is unfinished work." "Yeah, but it's my unfinished work too now, I think." Mira held out the map. He looked at it, surprised. "That's a Solano map." "It's a finished Solano map," she said. "It doesn't need to stay in one place. Take it. You can use it to navigate, and when you come back to our world, you can return it." She paused. "If you want to come back." He took the map very carefully, held it the way you hold something important. "Thank you," he said. He folded it with expert hands and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Be careful," she said. "You too." "My pencils ran out. I'm going home for more." He laughed, a real laugh, unguarded, and it made the room feel briefly lighter. Edwin and Mira stepped through the iron door. The shop was exactly as they'd left it. The morning light was still slanted and gold through the front windows, which was impossible. They'd been gone 3 days, except that time in the unmapped world and time in ordinary Greywick were apparently different things, and Mira filed this in the large mental folder she was keeping on the rules of the place. She stood in the shop and breathed in the smell of it, ink, pine, paper, electricity, and felt beneath the familiarity of it something she hadn't noticed before. The shop itself felt slightly like the unmapped world, not because it was magical or unfinished, but because it was full of maps, and maps, she now understood, in a way she hadn't before, were not just representations of the world. They were acts of attention, declarations that a place was real and known and worth recording. Every map in the last meridian had been made by someone who had looked carefully at something, long and hard, until they saw its true shape. Mira looked at her father's drawing table, the commission stacked there, the half-finished work, and the pen he'd left with her. She put the pen back in its place on the table. "Dad," she said. Edwin, who had been standing at the window looking at the ordinary street outside the shop with the expression of someone who will never take ordinary streets for granted again, turned around. "What's the commission you're working on?" He blinked.
A topographical map of the Hill District north of the city, standard municipal work. Can I help? He looked at her for a long time, not the way adults look at children who are being precocious, the way one professional looks at another and takes a genuine inventory. You've seen wonders, he said. I have. Most people would want to sit down for a while. I want to keep going. I've been thinking about it. The map, the unmapped world, it needs people, cartographers, and it needs maps from our world too. All the maps we make, they feed into it, I think. They make the foundation stable. The more carefully we map our world, the more solid the other one becomes. She paused. I want to learn, properly, not just pencil stubs, the real thing, contour lines and scales and compass bearings and everything. Her father smiled, not the proud smile he'd given her in the tower, though that was in it too, but something wider and less complicated, the smile of a man who has been handed back something he was afraid he'd lost. Well, he said, we'd better get started then. He pulled a stool to the drawing table and patted the seat. Mira sat down.